Well, welcome everyone to Leading with Empathy and Allyship. I am your host, Melinda Briana Epler, the founder and CEO of Change Catalyst. At Change Catalyst, we build inclusive innovation through training, consulting, and events. And Leading with Empathy and Allyship is a place where we have deep, real conversations about how we can be more inclusive leaders in our workplaces and communities. Safe space to learn, to build empathy for each other, and to understand tangible actions we can all take to make a difference in each other's lives, in our workplaces, and our communities. So as I mentioned last week, we've been doing this show for a year. Our audience has been steadily growing. Thank you for joining us each week. We have 42 episodes. We've done 42 episodes, over 17,000 listeners across 89 countries. Please keep sharing. Please help us keep growing the audience, and glad this is helpful. Glad you're joining each week. Today, I'm really excited to have with me Tiwa Marcus, the founder of MPWRDX, and we'll be talking about centering the voices of Black, Hispanic, Asian, Pacific, and Indigenous and Native Americans in business and social justice. So glad to have you here, Tiwa. Welcome.
Thank you, Melinda. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you more about what it is that I'm up to and get to spread my message.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm excited too. And Tiwa invited me to his podcast to join him on his podcast a few weeks ago, and we had such a great conversation. And I wanted to continue the conversation and have it here. So I'm really excited to have that conversation with you all. So, what we do start with, we have been starting lately, I've been trying to do this more to describe ourselves to anyone who is listening and who is blind or low vision on the live show, and for anybody who is listening on the podcast. So if you would join me in doing that. I am a white woman with long hair, wearing a green shirt and black and white glasses.
My internet connection just missed out on a lot of the stuff you just said. I'm really sorry. I'm not sure. Okay. All of a sudden, it's just what we started out with, and then I heard I'm wearing a white shirt.
All right, let me do it again. So we describe ourselves so that anybody who's blind, low vision, on the phone, or who's listening to the podcast just knows what we look like. So I'm a white woman with long red hair, wearing a green shirt and black and white glasses.
Okay, I am a Native American male. My head is shaved bald. I have a very handsome face, and I'm wearing glasses that I customize myself. And I have a peppery beard, and I'm also wearing Native American jewelry, which is consists of a turquoise necklace, turquoise stones strung onto a necklace.
Thank you. So on screen, just a few logistics. On screen, we have 2 ASL interpreters today, and then one behind the scenes as well. We have Sarah Youngbear Brown, Kaylee Lind, and Holly Newstead all interpreting for us today. Sponsored by Interpreter Now. And this is also being live captioned by Maggie at White Coat Captioning. So if you want to turn on captioning, and if it's not already on, just go down to the bottom of your screen and click on closed caption. You might have to click the 3 dots and more, depending on what your screen looks like. Our team is behind the scenes doing lots of amazing things. Juliet, Renzo, Araya, Emily, and Darlene. Among other things, they're also in the chat. So if you have any questions, they're also moderating the chat and making sure that everybody adheres to our code of conduct, which you always do. So please engage with us in the chat. Please share who you are, share what you're learning and thinking during our conversation. That definitely helps us. And then if you have specific questions, we'll spend some time at the end on Q&A. So please use the Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen. And thank you for introducing yourself, Andrea, Kelly, and Michelle. I appreciate you all introducing yourselves and appreciate you being here. So, Tiwa, let's start by just if you could tell us a bit about your journey or your identity journey, how you came to do the work that you do.
Okay, well, I'm gonna, I have to take it back and explain kind of the history of my people and as well as my roots. So my name is Tiwa Marcus. We've said that already, but I am cisgendered male. My pronouns are he and him. I didn't put that on my name, but my tribe that my father, his father's father, and father before that, my reservation is I am a Taos Red Willow people. There are 19 Pueblo tribes in New Mexico, and on our reservation there are the adobes that my people lived in generation after generation for hundreds of years, and it is known throughout or known as one of the longest continuously or oldest continuously inhabited dwellings in the world, which is still inhabited today for over 1,000 years. So that is where one part of my bloodline and heritage comes from, and that's a really rich history and legacy that I think about all the time. And my name, Two Eagles, was given to me by my mother and father when they were traveling through the Sangre de Cristo Mountains near Taos. And my mother was pregnant with me at the time, Christine, and my father was Jose, and they had pulled over to see the view of the mountains and the mountain range, and they had saw two bald eagles flying overhead. And at the time, they didn't know what that's what my name would be, but they saw these two eagles. And the eagle, to the Native Americans, they fly. They're a very respected animal, and they are a symbol of leadership. But also, they fly the highest, and they're believed to be the most sacred. But also, they deliver the prayers of us to the Creator on the wings. So it was a very good thing for them to see. And then later on, when they came to naming me, they realized I was a boy, and they decided then that they were going to name me Two Eagles. So that was the history of my name. And when I started school, I grew up. I was born in Warren County, which is in Detroit, and I started. We moved to Oklahoma, and when it was around, I guess, first grade, my mother had registered me as Two Eagles Marcus to begin enrolling in school. Well, it came close to the time when they were supposed to have been being sent out registration forms or whatever it was, the instructions for the first day of school, and we didn't get one. So my mother went to the school and said, "Well, we're expecting this information. What's going on? Why haven't we received it?" And then the lady kind of pulled her to the side and said, "We disposed of that registration, so we didn't think that was a real person." So that started off. At that point, my mother made a decision that she was going to give me a pseudonym, kind of a convenience identity to use throughout school to have me more, blend in as far as normal, with an American name. And so she named me after my grandfather. My grandfather was Benito, but she named me Benji. And so that's the name I went throughout high school. And when I was 17, it was my senior year of high school. And I had been throughout school, I want to say I was indoctrinated, or I don't know what the term is, but I had internalized racism, which I still have to this day, but I didn't know what it was then. I was embarrassed to be a Native American. I just wanted to be white. I wanted to fit in with everyone. When I was in high school, so let me back it up. We moved back to Michigan, and I started school here in third grade. So I was 9 years old. And so I just wanted to be white like everyone else. I wanted to bury my ancestry. I didn't want to recognize it. I was embarrassed. So there were some incidents. One time, my gym teacher in junior high, we were in a group, like a huddle, and we were formulating some plan for some, soccer or whatever it was. And all of a sudden, Mr. Smith, that was his name, he turns to me and he says something. And the only thing I really remember about what he said was, he called me Sergeant Garcia. And I thought, because I'm the only brown kid, and Benji Marcus, and he called me Sergeant Garcia, and I was like, what does he mean? What does that mean? Like, why is he calling me Sergeant Garcia? And I said, well, what is Sergeant Garcia? And he said, he was the Mexican sergeant in the Lone Ranger or something. I don't remember what the reference was, but I mean, everything I remember from school, like that's one thing that like is still carries with me today. And then there was another time when I was in high school, and the assistant principal, I was, I don't know, I can't remember exactly what happened, but the principal had yelled out to me from like in a packed, it wasn't a lunchroom, but it was like filled with kids because it was like, I don't know, it wasn't recess because it was high school, but everybody was just hanging out in this room, and he yelled out and he called me chief. And that was another time where I was like, wow, what the, is it just by coincidence? Like, why is he calling me chief? Why is that? And again, I was just like, one of the things that really made me not feel like I was a part of what was going on in the school. So when I was 17, I finally started coming around to being more, I wanted to live my true identity. I was, my name is Two Eagles. I'm proud of my heritage and where I come from, and I'm not going to, this is going to be like my transition into like manhood and standing up for myself. So that first day of school for the senior year, I named my, I said, I'm Two Eagles. That's why I registered. And that was like my big stand for myself. But still after that, I dealt with a lot of, again, still, we're in a white society, which has been built around muting your heritages and the erasure of heritage and cultural identity to assimilate everyone. And that was, that's what our country was founded upon, is making everyone assimilate or be exterminated.
Yeah. Well, and I suspect your journey didn't stop there, that you've continued to kind of work through that internalized racism, move past the covering of your identity and reclaim it too.
So even after that, I still, as much as my mother would insist to have me go to powwows and reconnect with my culture, I was still resistant to it because I was still, it was like I'd go reluctantly, and I'd still feel awkward because I didn't feel like I fit in with the Native Americans because they were really connected to their culture and heritage, and I wasn't. But then I felt like I didn't fit in with white people at the same time because I was Native American and I wasn't white. So that's something that I've really been oppressed for a long time. And, it's embarrassing to admit that I was ashamed of my own people and my own identity, but that was something that was, ingrained in me. And we didn't learn, when we learned about Native Americans in school, it was, hey, yeah, America, it's so great. All these white people escaped tyranny, and then they came to this land, and then they encountered hostile savages. And when it's put onto you like that, I'm the only Native American in class, I'm learning about this history, and I just hear that my heritages are these savage people. But the reality was that the Native American, we're all on stolen Native American land right now. And Native Americans are literally prisoners of war to this day. I mean, this was our land. We lived here and we were invaded. So the reframing of history to be something where the white people encounter these hostile people. I mean, if you are living in your house and people barge in, are you just going to be like, hey, come on in? Or are you going to fight to survive and protect your family? I mean, that's what was happening, is that our people were fighting to exist. So when you're bombarded with this information that paints a negative picture of your people again, and it's like everybody kind of looks at you like, wow, savage Native Americans.
Yeah, and and I think a lot of people think of Native Americans as living kind of off on reservations, and I think that it's important for people to understand just how many Indigenous people live in our, are like you, and may have um, mm, through generations covered their identities, and aren't, and living in cities covering your identity, and it's a continued effect of colonization. And I think that that's important to talk about and to learn about and to reclaim that, rethink that history, relearn that history, all of us. And I think that it does, all of this kind of points to the topic today, which is around, how do we center the voices of BIPOC, people of Black, Indigenous, people of color, and people of color, in all of our work, in our justice work, social justice work, and also in our diversity, equity, and inclusion work.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, about how you have approached that?
So I'm gonna get into that right after I go into what got me really, the thing that started me was a year ago to get into forming MPWRDX, and it was the pandemic had just happened, not just happened, but this was around August, and it was August, and I'm still on a journey of discovering my own heritage and my people, and what we've done and what we've been a part of. And the more that I find out about it, the more that it creates a self-awareness of my obligations to my people, and helping lift them, or helping not only my people, but all the people of color that have been persecuted and having genocidal actions taken on them, or what it may be. But in August of last year, I had found out that it was the 340th anniversary of the Pueblo revolt. And so this was August 12th, would have been the second day of the 340th anniversary, because the Pueblo revolt lasted 10 days. But I had found that, or I'd learned about Pope, who was a medicine man, and he had been imprisoned by the Spanish colonizers. And at that time that this happened, several of the holy men had been executed, tortured, and put in prison. Whatever. Some of them obviously were executed, some were tortured and then put in prison. And he had been in prison for 5 years. And also at the time, just practicing our own religions was considered by the Catholics to be witchcraft. Now that was their own, they were the ones that deemed it witchcraft just because it wasn't part of their power system. Mm-hmm. And he got out of prison and he went into hiding in Taos, and he planned to see the ancestors that spoke to him when he was in prison. And they said, you must recover our history, and you must make sure, you must release us from this. So he made the plan, and he had to coordinate amongst the 19 Pueblos that were all, hundreds of miles away from each other. There's no communication network, not to mention all of them are occupied by the oppressors and kept under control. So he had to figure out a plan in order to communicate this message to everyone at the same time. So his plan was to coordinate everyone, was to have runners, young boys that would run to each Pueblo, and they had a knotted yucca cord. And the instruction was to untie one of the knots every sunrise, because also at that time there wasn't like a calendar. there wasn't days of the week. It was just like in 10 sunrises, we're all going to do this together. And so he coordinated that, and they made it happen. They were able to overthrow the colonizers and drive them out. And it's known as the most successful Native American revolt in history. And that went on for, I think, 10 years, and then they ended up coming back. But that was one thing that when I realized that he had put the culture, if you protect the culture, you're going to protect the people. And he had put the whole culture in front of his own personal safety, that he knew that he could die and be murdered or executed or tortured. But he knew that this had to be done, because if he hadn't have done that, I might not be here today talking to you. If he hadn't have done that, Deb Haaland might not be here today and be the Secretary of Interior of the United States. So when I think about that, to think that this one action, that he instigated then to make sure that we were still alive today and thinking of generations after him, that really spoke to me. And it said, it told me that, and it's the ancestors spoke to me, and they said, you have an obligation now too, to take everything that you've learned and everything that you know, and use that to help protect and preserve not only still the Native American cultures, but help other people of color be protected, and continue on. So that was like the catalyst for me, the moment of realization and inspiration. So then I said, one of the biggest problems that we have, there's many big problems, but one of the big problems that we don't have is that people of color do not own or control media companies. And in order to connect people that are, in order to connect people and bring them together and to be able to communicate message to them, you have to have control of the media in order to, set your agenda and rally people together. So that is what that is what my idea was for MPWRDX, was to be able to center the populations in one place and amplify their voices. Because also when it comes to media companies, typically what happens is the person of color, if they're Black or if they're Hispanic or Asian Pacific or whatever it is, they will focus on their own people and collaborating with the people that are like them, but which is good. They should. But at the same time, there needs to be something that connects, that links together all of those groups, because until we have the unity of all people of color, we will never be able to achieve a collective outcome that benefits everyone.
Like all the different Pueblo tribes.
Exactly. So when I saw, when I'm like, okay, this Popeye literally took some leaves and pulled the strings out of the leaves, and they had cords made and put knots on them, and that's how they coordinated that. So then I look at it today and I said, okay, here I am in 2021. We have fiber optic cable, which is like the yucca cord, and then the knots are like social media and everything that we have to use over that to connect and communicate with everyone. So that's something that I always think of, and then bringing it into 2021 and the invasion at the Capitol on January 6th. Another thing that really was ironic to me was that there was a photo, and it showed all of these soldiers sleeping in the I don't know, it's like it's the Monument Hall, and they're all sleeping at the foot of these sculptures. and one of the sculptures in there that they were sleeping at the foot of was Popeye. And Popeye was standing there with his knotted cord, and he was like, he was looking over the protectors of the democracy. And it just, to have that circle of he's still like watching over the people today that are protecting the democracy the same way he was protecting the culture in 1680.
You use the phrase systemic unracism. Can you talk about what that means and what that looks like?
Well, I think, I don't think everyone's completely sure what systemic racism is in the first place.
We have talked about that to some degree on this show over the last year, but so hopefully folks who are tuning in will have some idea. But yes, agreed.
So systemic racism is the institutional and structural racism that's embedded in all systems in the United States, whether it's government, capitalism, education, and healthcare, judicial systems, and they were just workplaces. They were designed to advantage white men and also designed to disadvantage people of color. Because when this country was founded, it was founded on the genocide of a race that was in the lands that they invaded, and then it was built on the backs of black skin, and enslaving other people. And then after the slaves were so-called freed, which they really, they weren't, but that's a longer explanation. But after the slaves were freed, they created systems still to keep people of color from accessing power, from accessing education. They created laws to imprison them. So they legally could imprison people of color for not having jobs, for not having houses, but they weren't given anything in order to build their own economies or able to sustain themselves, and they were actively prevented from achieving any sort of power or achieving any type of way to sustain themselves. So when I think of the term systemic unracism, is we have to, I think first of all is that everyone has been conditioned to be racist. They've been conditioned to be racist. I want to say more like biased, because against people of color, they've been indoctrinated in the system, and that's part of what I was telling you about earlier. Is with my own internalized racism, to not look upon my own people as people that were not savages. I mean, because that's the picture that was painted even in the Constitution. That says references merciless Indian savages. When you have that embedded in a document that lives on to this day, that everyone still looks at, and they describe a people like that, that's still, you look at that and you say, okay, this nation was founded by slave owners. And all the rules were written by slave owners to keep on benefiting them. The first, I think, 12 presidents owned slaves, and like 50 of the 70 signers of the Declaration of Independence. Don't quote me on that. You can Google the actual number, but most of them owned slaves when they signed that document. So they never wanted people of color to achieve any power. They always wanted to keep them out of power, but also use coded language so it didn't look like they were allowing them to have power. So when I think of systemic unracism, I think the first step in that is for people to set up a system for people to find out the true history of what was kept from us. Because when we were in school, we didn't learn the true history of what happened in this country. It was kind of a glorified a glorified up and like underdog story of a group of people that escaped tyranny in England to tame the Wild West, or to tame this savage land. And they encountered savages, that prevented them from doing that in the manner that they wanted to. But with systemic unracism, we need to be able to create systems, media systems, to help to communicate, organize, and motivate, but also to help unify the people. And until we get people, and also create social capital. So until we get people of color in positions of actual power, with an actual power shift, not just put into an organization to say, he's really, like, for most companies, they just do that so they're not under the microscope.
We just lost you for like 2 sentences. Could you go back a little bit?
Yeah. So there needs to be a power shift. And in order to have the power shift, because we are in a system that was created by white people to sustain white people, there needs to be a transfer of power in order for real change to happen in the policies and the racist policies that are in America today. And it needs to be led by people of color, because we have the life experiences and we have the knowledge to how to help our people the most. We can't rely on a structurally racist system to help us through that. We have to have our own power and financial capital to be able to achieve those things. So systemic unracism is finding out the truth about these power systems, and these power systems need to be undone. You can't just modify the systems and think that it's going to be okay. They need to be rethought, and they need to have input, and not only input, but actual power to change these systems. Not just, a lot of companies, let's talk about it on a company level. A lot of companies, what they'll do is they say, well, we need to start, how can we better support the people of color in our community? And so then they'll call up, well, I can think of one Native American, that's Two Eagles. Let's call him up and get some feedback from him. And then let's call up a few of these Black people know, and a few of these Asian people we know. And then they'll get ideas from them, and they'll just go back, and it's still the white people that are coming up with the ideas, instead of actually investing in the people of color to come on and say, hey, look, instead of us questioning you and figuring out what we're going to do, how about let's bring you in and give you the power to actually do stuff, and actually give you the power to make these changes, instead of us trying to figure out what we think is best for you, and then putting the money towards it, as opposed to having you come in, a person of color, and giving you the money and giving you the authority to dictate how it happens. Everything has to still have the approval of white people ultimately in order to transfer power. I mean, any power that people of color have in this country now was only because it was allowed for them to have it by white people. Because we have no power. We do not have power to control or change anything. People of color. I mean, we can host diversity inclusion classes, or we can say, oh well, let's donate money back to this organization that's helping Black people or Hispanic people or whatever it is that are in poverty. But that's not a solution. That just keeps the people in poverty. It's not empowering those communities to be able to rise out of those situations. It just keeps it going along. It's like if you have when you have cancer, or if you have cancer and then you don't remove all the cancer, it's like you'll never get healthy again if the cancer is still there. I don't think that's the right
Mm.
the right description, but
Yeah.
it's like you have to do more than just diversity and inclusion classes or
Mhm.
shifting a few dollars here. Because when you have all these organizations that benefit of people of color, but then you don't actually invest in them getting out of those situations, the power isn't going to shift. There's no be no transfer of wealth, and those people will still be in those situations 100 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the very beginning of change that Deb Haaland was is now the Secretary of Interior. I mean, over 500 years, finally. I mean, that is such a huge and important thing that I don't think everybody really a lot of people don't really understand the significance of that. But it's really powerful, and much more needs to happen like that. Um, so can you maybe talk a little bit about practically speaking, and do you have some suggestions for how people can rethink business, how people can rethink their workplaces to center Black, Hispanic, Asian, Pacific, and Indigenous Native American experiences? How would you suggest people kind of take this into their workplaces? Obviously, power is a huge and important piece of that. What are your suggestions?
On an individual level, for people to take action, I think that part of it is when you have the opportunity to, first of all, if you see something happening, let's say you're in a group meeting and a person of color, is trying to speak and somebody's speaking over them or trying to, not let them have a voice. You need to address stuff like that. Whether it's men or women, or people of color, you need to make sure that people of color are allowed to say what they have to say. And also, like, if you're in a situation to get feedback, and you are leading the conversation, uh, people of color aren't necessarily always going to be the first ones to speak up or speak out about whatever it is that they want to have input on. So instead of going for the first person that raises their hand in the room, find a person of color, like wait for somebody to raise their hand and pick them. You have to be able to give people a platform and make sure that they're heard. And also, have the people of color leading the conversations and controlling the agenda. But also advocate for people of color to be put into positions of power in organizations, not just titles that can't get anything done, but like really put them into positions of power to really make significant change in the organization. But I think that also, on a bigger level of an organization, you have to make sure that it starts at the top, that the leader of the organization is ready to make these changes. And when you have an organization that's not ready to make those changes when it comes to anti-racism specifically, you're going to have a culture and a work culture that is not conducive to the advancement of people of color in the organization. And when that happens, it's, they'll find another place that's going to be more accommodating. And whether that's another company in your city, or they're going to go to a different city completely that's more advanced. So then what happens is that cycle just still keeps happening, is that people realize that their community isn't changing, or their city, and so they'll go somewhere else where it's more progressive. So a lot of people are losing out on talent that could help the community. And we have to invest collectively. The United States has to invest in the development of Black leaders and leaders of color to not only lead organizations to help them become more anti-racist and more diverse, but also to create companies that are founded by Black founders, because those are the ones that are going to create the new jobs for people of color to work at, as the population, by 2045, the population will be over 50% a global majority in the United States, meaning Hispanic, Black, Asian Pacific, and Native American. And there needs to be jobs for those people. There needs to be jobs, and it's not happening fast enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, okay, so in terms of kind of social justice work, do you have some specific suggestions for how people can better center diversity, equity, and inclusion work and social justice work, specifically around Black, Hispanic, Asian, Pacific, Indigenous, Native American experiences? And I just want to say to everybody, while each Two Eagles is answering that question, if you have any questions for us, please put it in the Q&A so we can jump, and we'll jump to those in a little bit.
Social justice work in a community, or
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are approaching allyship as, you know, a continuum of working in our communities and working in our workplaces, both kind of. And so how do we do that in our communities as well as we're advocating, as we're approaching activism? How do we do that better?
So when it comes to social justice or working in the community, you have to, our communities are filled with organizations that serve people of color, but they're founded by white people. We need to have support for nonprofit organizations that were founded by people of color, because they have the lived experience. They're the ones that are going to make the change, but they are, if you look at the research, they're underfunded because they do not have the social capital. They do not have the access. They do not have the power bases. So we need to make sure that if you are, if you're donating, find organizations that are founded by people of color and divert your funds there. If you work for an organization and, every year, everybody, I don't know how it works in an organization, but let's say they pick 5 places to donate a certain amount of money to every year, divert that money to people of color founded nonprofits. Make sure that the money, if you have any way to sway that direction of that money, that goes into those organizations, because they're the ones that are going to lead the change in their communities. It's not going to be white people going into the communities and helping make this happen. It has to be people of color founded organizations. So divert your own money to those organizations, seek them out, and offer any help you can. Connect, even I have found it myself, like in my community, I'm really well connected. I'm always connecting people. If I talk to somebody and they're having trouble, they're marketing for their nonprofit, I'll find somebody that can help them at a cheap price, or I'll give them, I've built websites for nonprofits in my community and hosted on my servers just so I can reduce their expense and also add any insights I can to help them set up Facebook pixels and get more money out of donors. And if I can give them any strategies or tactics in order to help them, I'll do it, because these people are typically coming out of a place of their own lived experience, and they don't know what they're doing. The only thing they know is that they're trying to help. And when I say they don't know what they're doing, is they know what they're doing, but they don't have the nonprofit business sense. Like, they don't know marketing. They're just trying to help. Mm-hmm. So I try to help empower them by helping them create more revenue opportunities so they have more funding so they can be sustainable. Like, we need to invest in the sustainability of these nonprofit organizations, empower them to be sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a question from Andrea on how allies can better support Indigenous Native American communities. Any thoughts there?
I would say that, right now, one of the biggest problems with the Native American communities, there's the missing, murdered, and Indigenous, missing, murdered, I can't believe I can't remember, missing, murdered Indigenous women and girls. Mm-hmm. It's a really a huge problem. There, Deb Haaland is actually, they're going to be devoting government resources to finding out what is happening, because when it comes to Native American women and even Native American people, it's like we're invisible. The data isn't being tracked. They don't know, you know, they haven't tracked the data to identify the different cultures and how it's, you know, how it's been impacting these communities. It's there's so much wrong with it, but if there can be money that can be devoted towards those organizations, or even also invested into the education of Indigenous children, but the education of Indigenous children by Indigenous teachers. They need, you know, the children need to learn their history, and they need to be supported.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just to go back to um, um, Indigenous women, girls and women. This is an issue in the United States, in Canada, in South America as well. It's a real problem that needs to be solved. Yeah, and actually Indigenous communities in Africa as well. It's definitely something to look into if you don't know about it. And agreed, yes, we talked about education in quite a few episodes here at Leading with Empathy and Allyship, and the real need for parents to advocate, for communities to advocate for change, and in what history is told, and how history is told, and told by whom. I think that, yeah. We have another question around how organizations can develop diverse BIPOC talent. And if you have any thoughts about, you know, you talked about hiring. There's also a need to, I think we talked a couple episodes ago, we talked with Rita about the work that she's doing, computer science education, and the need to center computer science programs specifically on within communities, within cultures, within, so we're really centering both from a gender perspective. She was working with girls from a gender perspective, a gender lens, and also from a cultural lens. And so that's kind of the education piece. If you have any thoughts about how companies can develop diverse BIPOC talent.
So develop them like while they're that are already in there, and take them up the rank. Well, you know, they have to be deliberate in those efforts, and with everything has to be top down. So you have to put the people in power to have them be able to do the work to encourage it. If you don't have those people in power, meaning, you know, in the C-suite, to be able to have that lived experience and know the challenges that are faced, it's just not going to happen effectively. So if you have people of color in your organization, you know, make sure that they know what the path is to move up the ranks, and move them up the ranks. You know, clear the pathway. Don't you know, if somebody isn't moving up the ranks, why aren't they moving up the ranks? Is it because they don't have a master's or there's additional education? Okay, well, invest in that education. They know the path for this, but they have to invest in this. It's something that has to be done. It's essential that it's done.
Awesome. You talked about the silos between people of color. Can you talk a little bit about how you see those silos can be bridged? What's the path to kind of moving forward together? How are you thinking about this, and how might other people be thinking? Could other people think about this? And I'm thinking about people who are activists, people who are working internally, ERGs, employee resource groups, and they're kind of siloed often in organizations as well. What is that kind of path to bridging those silos? Because I like you said, it is there's more power. We're working together and kind of moving forward together.
Yeah. I interviewed Netta Jenkins a few days ago, and I do have to apologize. I haven't published your your podcast episode yet. I'm really behind. I've been speaking with so many amazing people, and I'm such a small organization that, or we are such a small organization that we're backlogged. And I'm sitting on some tremendous content. But I've learned so much just even in the past few months. So Netta Jenkins is one of the, I think Forbes has her as one of the top 7 anti-racist educators. And she had went into a company, and she was talking about ERGs, and that how the ERGs need to come together. Like you have kind of the Black ERG and the Asian Pacific ERG, and then the Native or whatever, Hispanic. And they're all, again, kept apart. And how do you keep people from organizing and getting collective power? You keep them apart. You make them so they're all on their own. Like they need to be brought together into one place, and they all need to talk about what it is they're experiencing and what are the solutions for this. Like what are but they also need to know the history of how all this has happened. But none of us were taught the real history, because it was all controlled by the gatekeepers of white supremacy. They wanted to keep us from accessing the truth about it, because if everybody knew the truth, we wouldn't be in this situation as it is right now, because people would understand the insidiousness of covert systemic racism. And that's the thing with systemic racism, is covert. Nobody really knows. The people that we all participate in systemic racism, regardless of whether we want to or not, because that's the system we're in. So we have to work within that system. And in order to help bridge in order to bridge and link those groups together, they need to be brought together into one place to talk about their experiences, so people can actually humanize and make connection with those other groups. Because as it is right now, it's like oh, well, those people have those problems and we have our problems, and those people have those problems. They're all thought of separately. But if you bring them all together, they'll start to realize that all the problems are coming from one place, and that is white supremacy and systemic racism. So they need to be brought together, and they need to talk about, they need to break down the barriers. And that's one thing that happens, is when you don't know about something, you're afraid of it, or you're reluctant. Like if you're going into a black room, like a dark room with no lights on, you're scared because you don't know what's in there. But if you walk into the same room and the lights are on, you're like, oh, it's just a room. But it's that fear of the unknown. And it's also bias. And you're never going to break down those biases that have been ingrained in you if you don't take the time to educate yourself and learn about the other people and have conversations. Everybody, all people of color, can come together on the one fact of systemic racism has done something to negatively impact them, whether it's healthcare, ability to get a job, whatever it is. Everyone
Education,
has
criminal justice.
Exactly.
Workplace. Yeah. We could talk for hours, I know, and we're out of time. Where can people learn more about your work?
There's the 2 places to find out would be MPWRDX.com, which is MPWRDX.com. And then also please connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Two Eagles Marcus, TWOEA. My first name is Two Eagles, so please don't message me and call me Marcus.
And we cut out right when you were spelling your name.
I said, remember everyone, my first name is Two Eagles, so please don't message me and address me as Marcus, because that's
awesome. Yes, 100%.
That's, you know, that's something that's another way that I'm reminded every single day that I'm Native American, is that I get 5 messages a day and every single person calls me Marcus.
Wow.
So that's my daily, my 5 times a day dose of microaggressions.
Wow, I'm sorry about that.
But you know, I talked to my cousin's actually named Benito, and I had explained to him my frustration. He lives in Taos still, and I talked to him and I told him, you know, I said, it's so frustrating. I get so annoyed, and I some people, I just lash out at them. And he said, you know, he said, Two Eagles. He said, you have to find out, are they coming to you from a place of love, or are they coming to you from a place of hate? Like, are they trying to make fun of you, or are they sincere and they want to know more? Like, what is it what are they doing? How are they approaching you? And so when he told me that, I mean, you can figure, you know, it's really an opportunity for me to educate people. And it may not be something that I asked for, but it's something that I have to do. So ever since that conversation, I am much more, I want to say, happy to explain it, or much more interested in it, unless somebody's really being disrespectful. But typically they're not. Most people say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then I tell them the story and they're like, wow, that's so amazing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining me today and having this conversation, and for sharing your story and your wisdom, and appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much, Melinda. I really appreciate you and your work, and also, you know, your allyship and giving me the platform to reach a new audience. And hopefully people will have learned something from what I had to say, and hopefully they'll take some more time to learn about their own biases. And I need to admit to everyone, which I did earlier, is that I am still dealing and working through my own internalized racism. I'm dealing with my own biases, my own sexism. None of us are immune or impervious to it, because it's been bashed every day. We're exposed to racist and sexist messaging and visuals, and we have to actively, systemically unracism ourselves.
Yeah, agreed. Well, thank you everybody for going on that path, for doing the work of change, internally and externally. And my question to you is, how will you rethink your work to focus on systemic unracism? Perhaps thinking about giving power to BIPOC people to redesign those systems that we've been talking about. So join us each week, and please share this with your colleagues. You can find our previous episodes at changecatalyst.co/allyship series. And please find this episode on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube, and like it, subscribe to it, help us grow our audience. Appreciate you all, and see you next week. All right. Thank you, interpreters. I appreciate you all. I love it.
Thanks, everyone. Hey, I see a kid.
Thank you, Sarah. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Melinda.
Oh, yeah, sorry, bye.
And sorry, I was on mute. And she said, oh, I appreciate it. See you and bye-bye.
Bye.